So, hello. As you said, my goal in life is to make more smart people in the world. And one of the ways in which this can be done is with chemical methods. We talked about this last year. What I'm going to be talking about what I'm going to be talking about this year is primarily working memory training and other forms of brain training. So, just a quick aside, my main day job is doing neurofeedback. I have a little device which measures brain blood oxidation. It's kind of like a pocket fMRI machine. We have one instance of this upstairs on the first floor, or the top floor, or whatever, with the crash space team. So if you go over there, you might see it. I'm not sure if it's currently working, but tomorrow it will be working, and you will be able to lift droplets of water out of a little bowl type thing and make them float upwards. It's pretty nifty. So that's what this is. And so you may have heard of brain training. One problem with brain training is that it usually doesn't work. So working memory training has been around for a long time. People have tried it for a while. In the 70s, somebody tried to train a college student, just a regular college student, nothing special about him. He was an athlete, he liked to run a lot. They trained him on what's called a digit span task, which is a task in which you are intended to remember digits and repeat them backwards. Pretty simple thing. They trained him on this for over 200 days, for an hour each day. And over the course of this, he started at a digit span of around 6 or 7, which is average, and made his way up to a digit span of 80. He was able to remember 80 digits after hearing them once and repeat them backwards without errors most of the time. And they tried this with another student, which he trained, and he also made it up to about 60 digits. However, this training benefit did not show what we call transfer. He wasn't able to take that benefit and apply it to other skills. If you even gave him a very similar task, such as a consonant span, where he has to remember consonants, letters, and repeat them backwards, he couldn't do that. He only could do 6. And the reason that he had this very domain-specific ability is that he learned ways of doing that particular task that allowed him to chunk the data into discrete or larger chunks, and then chunk those chunks, etc., and produce a hierarchical representation in his mind, but was only specific to that particular type of thing. And this kind of result has been found many times in a lot of different contexts. If you train somebody on some task, they almost always get better at that task, but they usually do so in a way that's very domain-specific and does not transfer to other tasks. So another study, more recent, in which a very similar thing was shown was in, I think this was 2010? Yes, published in 2010. It was a very large study, had 11,430 participants in it. And they trained their subjects on 6 tasks and tested them on a bunch of other tasks. And they got better at all the tasks that they trained on, but they didn't get better on other ones. This particular study is problematic because it also only trained their subjects for 6 hours. And they weren't doing any one task for that whole time. So the fact that these 2 studies didn't work does not mean that brain training in general cannot work, just that the way these 2 people did it hasn't worked. In contrast, another study, or another group, did find transfer of the benefits they found. They were using what was called a dual end-back task. Later research found that it doesn't have to be a dual end-back task, it can be an end-back task, but I'll get into that in a minute. What a dual end-back task is this. You have 2 streams of information. Say you have positions of squares on a grid, that's the top one, or you have letters being spoken aloud. In a 2-back task, for example, your job would be to identify when, at any given moment, the stimulus being presented is the same as the ones 2 trials before. So, in the visual, you see the center one, that's the same as 2 trials before, so that's a match. But the next one is not the same as 2 before, and so forth. And with a dual end-back task, you have to do that with 2 different streams simultaneously. So you would have 2 matches for the second and the third C, or the 3rd and the 5th letter, or whatever. And this task did show, well, okay, so they got better at that task, not surprising, but they also got better at an IQ test, specifically the Bochum-Matrixen test, a matrix reasoning test where you're supposed to take a look at a 4x4 grid with one space missing, and you're supposed to figure out what the rule is that determines what goes in what square and pick out the remaining thing. So it's not a very similar type of test to the dual end-back task at all. It's very unrelated. And you can clearly see in the open circles, The control group got better on it because they were doing it twice. People get better at something when they do it twice. But the trained group did considerably better than the control group and had a much larger gain pre and post. Also, the trained groups were split into 4 different subgroups, which trained for different periods of time. And the longer the period people trained for, the greater the gain on the IQ test they saw. And if you look at the 8 training day group, that group did not seem to benefit significantly at all. They it could have just been chance that they had that small deviation from 0. So what we see here is a nearly linear effect of training with a threshold. You seem to need to train for 8 days or more, or 8, let's see, you're doing 20-minute sessions. So 8 to 20-minute sessions or longer at least in order to find benefit, and probably something more like 12 to 20. Let's see, so I'm going to show you a quick, well, no. So I'm one of the developers for Brain Workshop, which is a clone of that dual and back task program. You can all download it, it's free, it's completely free. This screenshot of the webpage is old. It says that it's been downloaded over 40,000 times. We've exceeded that by 1 order of magnitude. We're now at about 600,000 times, or 400,000 times if you ignore the Russian botnet, which for some reason likes our project. And let's see. So the program looks like this. Got a main screen. If you want, you can choose a bunch of different game modes. You can do triple and back. You can do quad and back, etc. But let's just start with dual and back. When you start, you can't hear it, but it's saying letters. And each time the square appears in the same place that it appeared currently, because it's dual 2 back, 2 turns ago, you're supposed to press A. And when the letter is spoken, it's the same as the letter spoken 2 turns ago, you just press L. This is a very difficult task to do initially. People often have difficulty with 1 back on their first day. Other days will be able to do 2. And people will get better at this with time. The important thing, though, is that people don't just get better at this. They also get better at other stuff. So they get better at remembering digits backwards, for example, or forwards. They also have reported a lot of other effects. Anecdotally, people have said that it improves their concentration and their ability to read, which makes a lot of sense if you understand that one of the limiting factors in reading comprehension is working memory. You have to keep most of the parts of a sentence or a couple of sentences in mind while you process it and compress it into something that can be stored in long-term storage. And if you can't remember what you're reading, if you can't remember the last sentence, then you'll probably have to read it again. So this finding that dual and back training improves intelligence has been replicated a few times. It's also been failed to, or a few replication attempts have failed. Currently, there are about as many successful replication attempts as failed. So it's not completely clear if it does work or not, but it's a lot more likely to work than the stuff that I showed you earlier, like digispan training or this study right here, which gave an online training task that was very similar to the stuff you get at, for example, Lumosity. Not that they're a bad company or are composed of bad people, it's just that the training paradigm that they are using has been shown several times to not work. Whoops. Another related training task that has also been shown to have some promising effects is that, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, Chien and Morrison, the complex working memory task. And so the way this one works is you've got a period of storage where you're encoding things into working memory, and this period of encoding has into it mixed a task that's supposed to just require your attention and require your concentration and focus. And that prevents you from, I'm running out of time. That prevents you from continuously rehearsing and encoding the information that you're presented with. So in this case, for the top, you have to judge whether each of the words being presented is a real word or a non-word, and press a button to indicate that. And after each judgment, you're given a letter, and you have to record that letter in memory, and then later you have to recall which of the letters you saw. So this distinguishes between short-term memory and working memory, because for short-term memory, you have to be continuously rehearsing it for it to stay in memory, whereas working memory does not have to be rehearsed. And they found, in their 42 subject study with 20 training sessions of 30 to 45 minutes each, that they got better on the train task, big deal. But they also got significantly better at 3 of the 5 untrained tasks. They showed transfer to 3 out of 5 tasks. They did not show transfer to their IQ tests. That was a bit of a surprise. But they did show something that was just as cool. The people got better at reading. You know those like reading comprehension tests that you take with you when you do like an SAT or something like that, where you read a paragraph and you have to answer questions on them afterwards? They got better at those, which is a lot more real world than a lot of the other kinds of things that people see. So doing this task might make you a better reader. Unfortunately, there isn't an open source free version of this training task yet. I'm trying to find somebody to program it. I don't have the time, so anybody wants to implement it, come talk to me, and the world will love you and be a better place as a result. Let's get this, maybe get back into it later. Oh my. Oh my. Sorry. I thought I had this here. I'm just going to quickly mention some of the stuff that I talked about last time because it's really cool. So there's this substance called creatine, and you might have heard of it. Bodybuilders use it. It's used for maintaining high levels of ATP availability. And that's cool for bodybuilders because they like to work out and make their muscles big. But it's also really cool because it improves ATP availability in the brain too. So it improves your brain's ability to have access to energy. And that allows neurons to fire for longer bursts before they get tired. And that's important for stuff like working memory because neurons in the principal gyrus tend to fire in large, strong bursts. And that firing is correlated with in this case, a monkey. The monkey's remembering what it is they're trying to remember. But that could also, the monkey would forget. So if the neurons get fatigued, they forget. Creatine helps prevent the neurons from getting fatigued. And a study was done in 2003 in which they investigated whether blah, 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 it makes people smarter, improves performance by about 1 standard deviation, and improves digit span by about 1.5 digits. And it's cheap and it's free and it's safe. There's also a couple of other stuff. There's modafinil. Modafinil is pretty awesome. It helps you concentrate and focus. And paracetam improves verbal learning and verbal memory. I think that's all I'm going to talk about right now. Any questions? Let's see. You were first, second, third, fourth. Question? Creatine will make you gain a little bit of fluid weight. Modafinil is a drug and has a few side effects, far fewer than many of the other stimulants, but it is such, and you should treat it such. Oh, sorry. The question was any negative side effects to any of those things. Paracetam makes some people sleepy. Dual NVAC training. I've heard a lot of interesting reports from that. Some people claim that it makes them really fatigued. That's actually not that common. A lot of people make it feel them really energized and jazzed. Some people say that, let's see, gives them a headache or makes them hallucinate. I don't know if there's causation involved in those things. Next question. Next question back there somewhere? Yeah. Gotcha. So the question is, what was the name of the technique that improved reading comprehension, but for which there was no currently available software? The technique is, as far as I know, only called the Chain Complex Working Memory Task. And that's from Chain et al. 2010. I can give you the reference later if you want. And then over there.
Yeah, so the question is, why are we seeing those effects in cognition?
Oh, the question is, why are we seeing those effects in cognition? Very excellent question. So it's probably not that we're training working memory capacity. That's probably not what makes these things work, but rather that we're training the ability to update the contents of working memory. I'm very glad you asked that question because I totally missed to talk about this. So the dual NVAC task requires you to simultaneously access and update content in your working memory. And it's probably that influences the ability to do better on other things, because in normal life you don't just have to remember things, you have to remember things and change things and mutate the contents of your memory. There's another study that was done fairly recently that looked at a pair of tasks, one of which involved updating working memory capacity and one of which didn't, and then another control task, and compared those and found that specifically the one that had the updating component improved the kids' performance on the tasks. I think that's all. Do you have another speaker coming up? Yes. Okay, Dave, are you ready? All right, I guess I can take one more question while he's plugging in. Question? Yes.
Have you done any functional MRI in the study to see what parts of the brain are
The question is, have they done any functional MRI to see what parts of the brain are, I heard hand waving at that point. The answer is yes. It's a difficult question to answer because you have to figure out exactly when you're doing the fMRI. And the results seem to be that there's a frontoparietal network involving dorsolateral prefrontal cortex on both sides, left and right, as well as the right parietal cortex. And activity in that area either increases or decreases depending on when you're looking. It seems that people become more efficient in their use of those parts of the brain, but also become more capable of using those parts of the brain to a large extent. So depending on whether you're loading them fully or just at the same level, they either use more energy or less. There's also been shown to be an increase, what appears to be an increase in dopaminergic activity in the prefrontal cortex. Although what they exactly found was a decrease in D1 receptor concentrations, but that's probably because of downregulation of receptors as a result. But that wasn't actually an fMRI stick, that was a PET. So sorry, I answered the wrong question. Right, I think I'll pass on the mic.